There are people out there that would call themselves a fan of yours, and what do you think of that? Because that to me is so jarring.
I try not to acknowledge the word fan. I feel like it's too small of a community, and I can't convince myself to have that much of an ego to actually
Yeah,
have fans
I
yet.
don't. Yeah, I feel weird about it because whenever someone says I'm a big fan of you, I'm like, I'm just a fucking guy. I'm just a guy. I So I have decided that because I have no idea how to start the videos for this series, that I'm just going to open every video with a joke about the city that the team plays for. So here it goes. Do you like it? Do you think Cleveland is cool? I've never heard anybody say that they're going to Cleveland on vacation. What's so good about Cleveland? I can't tell if that is the best intro I've ever made, or the worst one, probably the latter. But not only does the city of Cleveland suck, as Joakim Noah so brilliantly pointed out, but the Cavaliers also suck. After a questionable draft and an uneventful offseason, I do not expect the 19-win Cavaliers to get a whole lot better. Let's talk about why. Before we get into this video, part 2 of the interview with the NBA storyteller is up on the podcast channel now. It was a really fun interview to do, and if you are a fan of the NBA storyteller, you are not going to want to miss it, and if you're not a fan of the NBA storyteller, what's wrong with you? So go check out part 2, and of course, check out part 1 if you have not yet, and let's get on with the video. The Cavaliers are set to have a very weird season next year with the draft selection of Darius Garland. Yes, the Cleveland Cavaliers' two best young players are both point guards, when they could have just drafted Jarrett Culver, but whatever. The Cavaliers will be bringing out a starting lineup of Darius Garland, Collin Sexton, Cedi Osman, Kevin Love, and Tristan Thompson. And off of the bench, unless a buyout happens, Brandon Knight will be the backup point guard. Then there is Jordan Clarkson, Kevin Porter Jr., Larry Nance Jr., and Ante Zizic. The backcourt of Darius Garland and Collin Sexton is the first thing and probably the most interesting thing to tackle here. The main reason I have Sexton as the 2 guard here is just the simple fact that he is a good bit bigger, Garland is skinny as hell, while Sexton has a lot of muscle on his bones. So as a result, Sexton will probably be guarding most of the 2 guards that the Cavaliers face this year. But offensively, due to the fact that Garland is a lethal shooter and an overall better off-ball player than Sexton, I fully expect Sexton to take a majority of the ball handling duties when Garland is playing on the court with him. I understand that Sexton shot 40% from 3 last season, but on just 3.6 attempts, let's not act like he's Stephen Curry. On such a small sample size, he should really just be seen as an above average shooter, but not like lethal. Garland, on the other hand, comes into this draft as possibly the best shooter in it. Certainly the best shooter off of the dribble, and as a result, I think he will be playing more off ball. But if I was the Cleveland Cavaliers head coach, I would try to stagger Sexton and Garland's minutes so that at least one of them is on the court at all times, mainly because Garland needs to be able to show what he can do without Sexton, because being in an off-ball role, or at the very least a split ball handling role, he will not get a full opportunity to show just how good he is at everything outside of shooting. And if I'm being honest, I just fully expect Garland to be the best guard on this team. Nothing against Collin Sexton, I just think that Garland is a way better shooter and decision maker. I also think the juggling of Collin Sexton and Darius Garland could either be, or both be, really detrimental but also really beneficial to this team. I think them playing together is just a bad idea, but you do have to play them at least 30 minutes a game, so you do have to play them together. But also, being able to have one really solid scoring point guard on the court at all times is a nice luxury to have. Sexton and Garland are a weird question mark for the Cavaliers for this upcoming season. How that materializes, I'm not too sure. What I am fairly sure about is that one of them will need to be traded in this offseason or the upcoming offseason. The reason they might have to wait 2 seasons is because this year in the draft there's a lot of point guard options, so teams won't be that interested in Collin Sexton as they would be 2 years from now. But if I'm Cleveland, I'm trying to make these two look as good as possible so that one of them can get as much trade value as you need. And if I had to make a prediction, I expect, obviously as I said earlier, short term, and I also expect long term for Darius Garland to be the best player of these two. And just so you guys know, I don't have anything against Sexton, because I found that on the internet, if you criticize any player ever, it's because you hate them, but Sexton was the best player on Alabama's college basketball team 2 years back. And Alabama is the college that I root for, so I really liked Collin Sexton. He made Alabama's basketball team really good for the first time in a while. I'll actually be watching an Alabama football game right after I finish recording this. Roll Tide. I probably just lost a lot of subscribers for saying that, but let's move on. Let's move past Sexton and Garland. Their starting small forward will be Cedi Osman, who I feel has somehow become weirdly overrated. He averaged 13 points, 5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists, shooting 42% from the field and 35% from 3. I mean, he's alright. I think a good comparison for him would be prime Nick Batum minus the defense. And before you Cavs fans freak out, Nick Batum was actually really good at one point. He did have to earn that insane contract somehow. At his peak in Portland, he was a 15-5-5 guy, and he did that for 2 years in Charlotte as well. I think Cedi can be that as well. He's a pretty capable playmaker, solid rebounder, a not so efficient mid-teen scorer, and a pretty good three-point shooter. Kevin Love, I think, is actually the next biggest question mark for this Cavaliers team, but with Kevin Love, it's a lot more than just one question. Can he stay healthy? How good is he at this point? Do they trade him, and if so, for what? So now watch as I try to answer all those questions and probably end up looking like a jackass a few months from now when none of those answers are correct. Kevin Love only played as little games as he did last year once in his career, so I wouldn't expect 22 games again. Probably in the 60s as he's done in the last few seasons. As for how good he is, in the 22 games that he played last year, he shot just 38% from the field, but being that he played just 27 minutes and even didn't start for one of those games, I think it's safe to assume that he was playing injured. So I would just go with what he was doing in the 2017-18 season, a solid 17 and 10 with okay shooting splits. That's probably what you can expect from him this season. The answer to if they should trade him is yes, and for what? Well, the answer to that would be one good young player or alright young player, as well as a bad contract, and maybe you can get a first round pick. And as for exactly what I think they should trade for, Zach Collins, Hassan Whiteside, and a protected first is probably the best that you are going to get. Zach Collins is a solid big man, pretty much alright in every area of the game, with a lot of room to grow being just 21 years old. Hassan's contract is also expiring, so you actually free up some cap space. Not that that really matters because it is Cleveland, and as we should all know.
I don't know about this place, man. I just stayed in my hotel room, man. Every time I look out my window, it's pretty depressing out here, man.
At the 5 spot, I would start Larry Nance Jr. He's pretty solid, but I'm betting they're probably going to start Tristan Thompson. As for the backup point guard spot, Brandon Knight. This is a sad story. Kyrie Irving crossed him over in the Rising Stars game just to curse him to be the backup point guard on the Cleveland Cavaliers after having a bright future as a point guard. Just a sad, sad story. Now, as for how I feel about Jordan Clarkson, pretty much just copy and paste how I feel about Terry Rozier. He's good at scoring, but I don't think it is at all in an impactful way. At least he's actually a little bit efficient. At the 3, I was surprised that Kevin Porter Jr. fell as far as he did. The way people were talking about him, it seemed like he was going to be a late lottery to mid-first round pick at worst. But he could provide a scoring punch off of the bench. People have compared him to James Harden, which I think might be the laziest comparison ever. They pretty much just went with the key characteristics on that one to make the comparison. Both are big guards who are left-handed, and they both take a lot of step-back jumpers. That's where the comparison ends. But he could end up being the steal of this draft, so props to the Cavs for drafting him. I have have Larry Nance Jr. as the backup power forward, and that is because they do not currently have a backup power forward. Nance has played a good amount of 4, and he can spread the floor, good athlete, good rebounder, doesn't make too many mistakes. Overall, a very solid player to have. And Ante Zizic is an alright big man, pretty unskilled, but he's big, so there is that. This roster overall is not terrible. But I think Kevin Love misses a good amount of games and eventually gets traded this season, and I do think there will be a conflict with Sexton and Garland. Not necessarily off the court, but on the court there can be a lot of fit issues there. And there's pretty much no veteran leadership on this team, unless you want to count cheats on his pregnant wife all the damn time, Tristan Thompson. I wouldn't. And the coach that the Cavs just hired is going to be a rookie head coach. But the weird thing that I have found only 2 videos into this series is that it feels like no NBA team is actually that terrible, if that makes sense. Like, it seems like every roster in the NBA has at least a good handful of legit NBA players, when it hasn't felt like that all the time in the past. What I will say for this team is that there is a chance that Kevin Love looks like his former Minnesota self a little bit, being a good 20-10 guy, and there is a chance that Garland and Sexton actually work out really well, and this team is like a 30-35 win team. So I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that the Cleveland Cavaliers end up being a semi-respectable NBA team, but as of now, I have them as the 2nd worst team in the NBA. That's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.